the world was blissfully unaware of the looming terror as life went on in America. Jonathan, our main character, lived an ordinary life, going about his daily routines in the bustling city of New York. Little did he know that his life was about to be turned upside down by an insidious force. It started subtly. A few isolated cases of a strange illness that seemed to be nothing more than a severe flu. But as days passed, the mysterious epidemic spread like wildfire, engulfing cities and towns across the country. Panic and fear gripped the nation as more and more people fell victim to this relentless affliction. Jonathan's peaceful existence was shattered when his neighbor, Mrs. Wilson, became one of the first victims. He couldn't understand how a seemingly healthy woman could deteriorate so rapidly. The once vibrant and cheerful lady now roamed the streets with vacant eyes and a thirst for human flesh. It was like something out of a nightmare. As the death toll mounted, signs of the infection's sinister nature became apparent. The infected exhibited bizarre behaviors, their bodies contorted in unnatural ways, and their eyes turned a sickly shade of crimson. They lurched through the streets, seeking the uninfected, spreading the contagion like a malevolent plague. Jonathan, like many others, barricaded himself in his apartment, hoping for the authorities to quell the chaos. But help never came. The once bustling city turned into a ghost town, echoing with the eerie moans of the infected. With supplies dwindling and the cries of the infected growing louder, Jonathan knew he couldn't stay hidden forever. Gathering his courage, he ventured out into the apocalyptic landscape, where danger lurked around every corner. It was a heart-pounding journey as he encountered more and more of the infected, their numbers growing with each passing day. In his quest for survival, Jonathan stumbled upon a small group of survivors, led by a hardened ex-military officer named Sarah. Together, they formed an unlikely alliance, united by the will to live and the determination to find answers. Sarah had heard rumors of a potential cure hidden in a remote research facility far from the infected zones. It was a glimmer of hope amidst the despair, and the group decided to embark on a perilous journey to uncover the truth, and, if possible, find a way to reverse the horrifying effects of the epidemic. Their travels led them through desolate landscapes filled with dangers both living and undead. They encountered not only hordes of the infected, but also other groups of desperate survivors, each fighting for their own survival and often resorting to brutal measures. Amidst the chaos and violence, the group faced internal conflicts and doubts about their chances of success. Some questioned whether it was worth risking their lives for a slim hope of salvation. Yet they pressed on, driven by the desire to restore humanity to its former glory. As they neared the research facility, the true extent of the conspiracy behind the epidemic began to unravel. It was no accident or natural occurrence. It was a carefully orchestrated plan to unleash terror and chaos on a global scale. The motives behind such malevolence remained shrouded in mystery, but they knew that they had to put an end to it. With the odds stacked against them and the infected closing in, the group faced their greatest challenge yet. The fate of humanity rested in their hands as they prepared for the final confrontation with the source of the epidemic. Little did they know that their journey was just beginning, and darker horrors awaited them. In the midst of the apocalypse, they would discover the true depths of human resilience and the unfathomable darkness that resided within the hearts of both the living and the undead. The story of survival, love, and loss had only just begun, and Jonathan would soon learn that the price of living through such horrors might be more than he ever imagined. The journey to the research facility had been harrowing, but Jonathan and his group finally stood at its ominous gates. The place was nothing like they had imagined, a haunting maze of abandoned laboratories and dark corridors that whispered secrets of the past. The air reeked of decay, and the faint sounds of distant footsteps echoed through the empty halls. Sarah took the lead, her weapon drawn, as the group cautiously ventured deeper into the facility. They stumbled upon chilling remnants of experiments gone awry. Grotesque, half-human, half-monstrous creatures trapped in cold, steel cages. The knowledge that humans were responsible for these horrors sent shivers down their spines. It was evident that the facility had been ground zero for the outbreak, and the group realized that the answers they sought lay buried within the decaying walls. As they ventured further, they encountered blood-stained notes and discarded journals, each filled with madness and desperation. In one chilling entry, a scientist recounted the initial excitement of a breakthrough in regenerative medicine, but it soon became apparent that the experiments were unearthing something ancient and malevolent, a force they called the essence of immortality. The more they tampered with it, the more it consumed their minds, driving them to madness and turning their subjects into abominations. Suddenly, the group was ambushed by a pack of frenzied infected, and a fierce battle erupted. The facility's dim lights flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced with the chaos. The infected moved with uncanny speed and ferocity, but the group fought back with equal determination, pushing them back with every ounce of strength they had left. During the fight, Jonathan caught a glimpse of a mysterious figure in a tattered lab coat observing the mayhem from a distance. Their eyes locked for a moment, and a sinister smile played on the figure's lips before they disappeared into the shadows. Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As the last of the infected fell, they continued deeper into the heart of the facility. They reached a chamber with a large, ancient-looking door adorned with eerie symbols. It radiated an unsettling aura, and Sarah hesitated before pushing it open. Inside, they discovered a hidden chamber filled with ancient artifacts and writings from long-lost civilizations. Among the relics was a weathered tome written in an incomprehensible language, its pages filled with ominous illustrations of creatures that seemed to transcend reality. They couldn't decipher the texts, but the images spoke volumes of unimaginable horrors and otherworldly beings. The deeper they delved into the secrets of the facility, the more they realized that the essence of immortality was not merely a scientific discovery, but something beyond their understanding. An ancient evil that had slumbered for millennia, now awakened and unleashed upon the world. The group's exploration was interrupted by the sudden sound of a blood-curdling scream echoing through the corridors. They rushed towards the source, finding one of their members missing, and the others huddled in fear. The terrified survivor mumbled about a shadowy figure that had taken their companion, leaving no trace behind. Fear now gripped them like never before, and they knew they were not alone in the facility. The malevolent force they had awakened was toying with them, stalking them in the darkness, relishing their terror. Sarah's resolve wavered for the first time as she questioned their chances of survival. But Jonathan, though scared to the core, knew they had come too far to turn back. They had to confront this ancient evil and put an end to the horrors they had unleashed. As they continued their search for answers, the facility seemed to come alive with the whispers of tortured souls. The shadows twisted and danced, taking unsettling forms that taunted their sanity. They encountered more infected, some grotesquely fused with the ancient artifacts, a horrifying amalgamation of flesh and darkness. With each step, they drew closer to the heart of the facility, where the essence of immortality lay dormant, waiting for its chance to break free from its earthly prison. Unknown to them, the shadowy figure that had eluded them was the embodiment of the ancient evil itself, an entity that fed on fear and suffering, manipulating both the living and the undead to fulfill its insidious agenda. The group's determination to survive was put to the ultimate test as they faced a nightmarish series of trials within the Chamber of the Essence. The ancient writings foretold of a ritual that could harness the power of immortality, but the price was high, the sacrifice of a pure soul. The choice between life and death hung in the balance. As the horrors of the chamber closed in on them, the group found themselves divided, torn between the temptation of immortality and the desire to save humanity. The shadowy figure lurked in the shadows, whispering lies and sowing seeds of doubt. Jonathan was faced with a choice that could either save his life or seal his fate. The chamber's darkness tugged at his soul, promising eternal life. But he knew that succumbing to such temptation would unleash unimaginable horrors upon the world. In a moment of clarity, he reached for the ancient tome and began reciting an incantation that he hoped would banish the evil forever. The chamber trembled, and the shadowy figure let out a chilling scream, its form contorting in agony. As the last words of the incantation echoed, the essence of immortality began to dissipate, like smoke vanishing into the air. The ancient evil was thwarted, but the cost was heavy. The facility crumbled around them, and they were forced to flee, leaving behind the horrors they had unleashed. They emerged from the facility battered and traumatized, but with a newfound sense of purpose. The horrors they faced would haunt them forever, but they knew they had prevented an apocalypse that could have consumed the world. Yet, as they stepped back into the daylight, they couldn't shake the feeling that something dark and malevolent still lingered in the shadows, watching, waiting for another opportunity to rise again. Little did they know that the true nature of the ancient evil was far from vanquished. It had only retreated, biding its time, spreading its darkness across the world, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. The nightmare had just begun, and the horrors they faced in the facility were only a glimpse of the darkness yet to come. The group was now more determined than ever to face the approaching storm, knowing that their battle against the forces of darkness had only just begun. After narrowly escaping the crumbling facility, Jonathan and his group returned to their makeshift base, their minds haunted by the horrors they had witnessed. The encounter with the ancient evil left them on edge, knowing that the darkness still lurked out there, waiting for its moment to strike. As days turned into weeks, the infected showed no signs of slowing down. If anything, their numbers seemed to grow with each passing day, and the group realized that they were running out of time. They needed to find a way to stop the contagion before it consumed the last remnants of humanity. Their focus shifted to finding the origins of the outbreak, hoping that understanding its source could lead them to a solution. They scoured the remains of the research facility for any clues, but all they found were remnants of madness and despair. In the meantime, the world outside their sanctuary descended into chaos. With the collapse of society, new threats emerged, not just from the infected, but also from other surviving groups willing to do whatever it took to survive. Food and clean water became scarce commodities, and the fight for survival took on a desperate edge. As the group ventured beyond the safety of their base to scavenge for supplies, they encountered other survivors who had turned ruthless and hostile. The once close-knit bonds of humanity now frayed, and trust was a rare and fragile commodity. In the neighboring town, they came across a group led by a man named Robert, a charismatic figure who claimed to have the means to protect his followers from the infected. At first, Robert seemed welcoming, offering shelter and provisions to Jonathan's group. However, beneath the facade of generosity, they sensed something sinister. The other group's members looked at them with suspicion and fear, as if hiding a dark secret. Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that Robert's intentions were far from benevolent. As days passed, it became evident that Robert's group was more of a cult than a community. They worshipped the ancient evil as a god, believing it held the key to immortality and salvation. Their rituals were nightmarish, invoking the very darkness that Jonathan and his group had fought to banish. Their leader, Robert, claimed to communicate directly with the ancient evil, and he had convinced his followers that they were chosen ones, destined to inherit a world of everlasting darkness. The infected, in their eyes, were not mindless monsters, but enlightened beings, destined to bring about a new era. Jonathan knew that they couldn't ignore the threat that Robert's cult posed. If left unchecked, they would surely unleash the horrors they had barely managed to contain, but confronting them directly would be a suicide mission. As they deliberated their next move, they stumbled upon a survivor who claimed to be an ex-member of Robert's cult. Terrified and remorseful, she revealed the true extent of the darkness that had consumed their former leader. She had escaped, knowing that the group's rituals would lead to their doom. With this insider information, Jonathan's group hatched a plan to infiltrate the cult and dismantle it from within. They hoped to free the followers from Robert's grasp and put an end to the madness that fueled the ancient evil's return. Disguising themselves as desperate survivors seeking refuge, they gained entry into the cult's inner circle. The closer they got to Robert, the more unsettling their discoveries became. He had become more than human, a vessel for the ancient evil's influence. Their deception paid off, and they managed to gather critical information about the cult's plans. Robert intended to unleash the infected upon other surviving groups, spreading the darkness like a contagion, ensuring that no one would escape its grasp. As the day of the cult's reckoning approached, tension and fear swirled within Jonathan's group. The line between survival and madness blurred, and they grappled with the weight of the decisions they had to make. When the moment of truth arrived, they confronted Robert and his devoted followers, revealing their true identities and intentions. Chaos erupted as a brutal battle ensued, with the ancient evil's influence fueling the cultists' frenzy. Amidst the bloodshed and horror, Jonathan found himself face to face with Robert. The once charismatic leader had been consumed by darkness, his eyes glinting with a malevolent force beyond comprehension. In a gut-wrenching moment, Jonathan made a choice that would forever haunt him. With a heavy heart, he struck down Robert, not out of vengeance, but out of necessity to prevent the spread of darkness. As the cult fell apart, its followers slowly awakened from the grip of madness. They faced the harsh reality of the world they had helped create, haunted by the atrocities they had committed. Jonathan's group offered them a chance at redemption, hoping that humanity's capacity for goodness could outweigh the darkness that had consumed them. But the battle was far from over. The ancient evil's influence had spread beyond the cult, and its darkness continued to taint the world. As they regrouped and prepared to face the next wave of horrors, they knew that the ultimate confrontation with the ancient evil still lay ahead. With each passing day, they felt the darkness closing in, like a relentless tide threatening to engulf them. But in the face of unimaginable terror, they refused to be consumed by fear. The battle for survival had become a war for humanity's soul, and they were determined to face it head-on, for the fate of the world rested on their shoulders. Little did they know that the true horror was yet to reveal itself, an ancient malevolence that had been biding its time, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash its full, unimaginable power upon the world. The final chapter of their nightmare was about to begin, and Jonathan and his group would have to confront the darkest depths of human depravity and face the true nature of the ancient evil that had plagued them all along. The group's victory over Robert's cult brought only a temporary sense of relief. They knew that the ancient evil was far from defeated, and the darkness it unleashed was still spreading like a festering plague. Jonathan and his companions couldn't afford to rest. They had to find a way to stop the malevolence once and for all. In their search for answers, they stumbled upon an old journal hidden within the remains of a burned-out library. The journal belonged to an enigmatic figure known as the Seeker, a scholar obsessed with ancient mysteries and the pursuit of forbidden knowledge. The Seeker had dedicated his life to unraveling the secrets of the ancient evil, and his writings spoke of an artifact, the Heart of Desolation, that was said to hold the key to the malevolence's true nature and origin. Driven by the hope that the artifact could be their salvation, the group embarked on a perilous quest to locate the Heart of Desolation. The Seeker's journal pointed them to an isolated and treacherous mountain range, rumored to be a place of unspeakable horrors. As they traversed through the shadowy woods and snow-covered peaks, a sense of dread weighed heavy on their hearts. The mountain range seemed to exude an ominous aura, and the howling winds whispered malevolent secrets that made their blood run cold. With each step, the darkness closed in, and the group faced nightmarish trials. They encountered grotesque creatures, twisted by the ancient evil's touch, and illusions that played on their deepest fears. The line between reality and nightmare blurred, testing their sanity and resolve. As they climbed higher, the environment grew more hostile, and the air seemed to freeze their very souls. Yet, they pressed on, their determination fueled by the belief that the Heart of Desolation could be their only hope of ending the horrors that plagued their world. Finally, after days of treacherous travel, they reached a hidden cave, said to be the resting place of the artifact. The entrance was adorned with cryptic symbols and strange carvings, warning trespassers of the horrors that awaited within. Pushing aside their fear, they ventured into the darkness of the cave. Torches flickered, casting eerie shadows on the ancient walls. The air was heavy with the stench of decay, and the sounds of dripping water echoed ominously. Deep within the cavern, they found the Heart of Desolation, a dark, pulsating object that seemed to be alive with malevolence. Its mere presence sent shivers down their spines, and they hesitated to approach it. As they examined the artifact, the Seeker's journal revealed the truth. The Heart of Desolation was an ancient relic, rumored to have been created by an ancient civilization that worshipped dark entities. Its purpose was to harness the power of suffering and despair, feeding on the anguish of humanity to empower the malevolent forces it served. But as they delved deeper into the artifact's secrets, they realized that it was not just a vessel of darkness. It was a gateway to a realm of unimaginable horrors. The ancient evil they had encountered was merely a fraction of the malevolence that lurked beyond the veil. In a moment of desperation, they considered destroying the artifact, but the journal warned against such a reckless act. The heart of desolation was bound to the ancient evil, and destroying it could unleash even greater calamities upon the world. Instead, they devised a risky plan to use the artifact's own power against it. By channeling their collective will and emotions, they sought to overwhelm the darkness within the heart of desolation, weakening its connection to the malevolent realm. It was a gamble, one that could cost them their lives or worse, unleash even more horror upon the world. But the ritual was grueling, pushing them to their physical and mental limits. Their minds were bombarded with nightmarish visions, and they felt the ancient evil clawing at the edges of their sanity. But they held on, drawing strength from their shared determination to protect the world from the darkness that threatened to consume it. As the ritual reached its climax, the artifact trembled, and the malevolence within it screamed in defiance. For a moment, it seemed as though the ancient evil would overcome them, but they refused to back down. With a final surge of power, they succeeded in weakening the connection between the heart of desolation and the malevolent realm. In that moment, the artifact cracked, and a blinding light erupted from within, engulfing them all. When the light subsided, the heart of desolation lay broken, its malevolence dissipated. Their victory, however, came at a great cost. The group was left physically and emotionally drained, and the horrors they had witnessed would haunt their dreams for eternity. But they knew that they had succeeded in weakening the ancient evil's hold on their world. As they made their way back to their sanctuary, a newfound sense of hope bloomed within them. The darkness had been dealt a significant blow, and they were determined to keep fighting until it was eradicated entirely. But little did they know that their actions had not gone unnoticed. The ancient evil, though weakened, was far from defeated. It had felt their resistance, and had now turned its malevolence towards them with renewed fervor. The group's nightmares intensified, and they began experiencing strange visions, glimpses of a world consumed by darkness, where the infected and the malevolent forces marched together, threatening to plunge humanity into eternal despair. The final confrontation with the ancient evil was imminent, and Jonathan and his companions knew that their fight for survival had become a war for the very soul of humanity. The horrors they had faced were only the beginning, and the true test of their strength and courage was yet to come. With darkness closing in from all sides, they stood resolute, ready to face the ancient evil head-on. United by their shared purpose and the will to protect the world from the malevolence that sought to destroy it, they prepared for the ultimate battle that would decide the fate of humanity. Little did they know that the ancient malevolence was not their only enemy. Hidden in the shadows were other forces, waiting to exploit their vulnerability, and the war for humanity's survival was about to escalate into a terrifying crescendo of horror and despair. The fate of the world hung by a thread, and Jonathan and his group were all that stood between salvation and eternal darkness. As the group prepared for the final confrontation with the ancient evil, a sinister presence enveloped their sanctuary. The air grew heavy with malevolence, and shadows seemed to dance with a life of their own, whispering dark promises of destruction and despair. Jonathan and his companions knew that the time had come to face the darkness head-on. They had come too far to back down now, and the fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. With grim determination, they set out on their journey to confront the ancient evil once and for all. The Seeker's journal hinted at a long-forgotten temple hidden deep within the heart of a cursed forest. Legends spoke of a place where the boundaries between the mortal realm and the malevolent realm were thin, a place where the ancient evil had been imprisoned eons ago. The journey to the cursed forest was fraught with peril, as if the very land itself rejected their presence. The group faced nightmarish apparitions that seemed to materialize from thin air, and the haunting cries of the infected echoed in the distance. As they approached the temple, a sense of foreboding washed over them. The once grand structure now lay in ruins, a testament to the passage of time and the horrors it had witnessed. Ancient carvings adorned the walls, depicting grotesque figures and unimaginable suffering. Within the temple's depths, they encountered traps and illusions that tested their resolve. The malevolence seemed to play with their minds, conjuring visions of their deepest fears and regrets, but they pressed on, determined to face whatever horrors lay ahead. In the heart of the temple, they found the gateway to the malevolent realm, an ethereal portal pulsating with dark energy. The air crackled with foreboding, and the ground trembled beneath their feet as they approached. As they prepared to step through the gateway, Jonathan hesitated, his mind flooded with doubt. He knew that crossing into the malevolent realm could mean facing horrors beyond imagination, and the risk of never returning weighed heavily on him. But he was not alone. Sarah, their unyielding leader, placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Her eyes held a glimmer of hope and determination that dispelled his fear. With newfound strength, Jonathan took a deep breath and led the way, the rest of the group following behind. The moment they stepped through the gateway, a nightmarish landscape greeted them. The malevolent realm was a twisted reflection of their world, filled with warped visions and malevolent creatures that defied description. The group faced nightmarish trials, their sanity pushed to the brink by the malevolence that surrounded them. It fed on their fear, taunting them with illusions and visions of the darkest moments of their lives. Yet they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that they had to confront the ancient evil at its source. The Seeker's journal had spoken of a hidden chamber where the malevolence was most concentrated, a place that held the key to the ancient evil's true form. With each step, the malevolence grew more oppressive, and their journey became a descent into a bottomless abyss of horror. The very fabric of reality seemed to unravel, and the group felt their minds slipping away into madness. But they refused to surrender to the darkness. Their shared purpose and unyielding will kept them anchored to reality, guiding them through the nightmarish maze. Finally, they reached the hidden chamber, a place pulsating with malevolence. It was here that the ancient evil had been imprisoned long ago, and it sought to break free once more. In the heart of the chamber, they found an ancient altar, and atop it rested a grotesque idol, the true form of the ancient evil. The idol was an amalgamation of suffering and despair, a monument to the malevolence that had haunted their world for eons. As they approached the idol, it stirred to life, its eyes glowing with malevolence. The very air seemed to vibrate with the darkness it emanated. But Jonathan and his group stood resolute, their minds shielded from the idol's influence by their shared determination. With a surge of power, they channeled the energy they had gained from weakening the heart of desolation. The idol's malevolence recoiled, and for a moment, it seemed as if they might succeed in banishing the ancient evil once and for all. But the darkness was cunning. It fought back with a ferocity that took them by surprise. Shadows twisted and writhed, and the idol's malevolence surged, overwhelming their collective strength. In the midst of the battle, they realized that the ancient evil was not a singular entity, but a force that thrived on the suffering of humanity. It had taken root in the hearts of those it had touched, and its true power lay in the malevolence that resided in every human soul. The group faced a stark choice: to succumb to the malevolence and let the darkness consume them, or to embrace the light within themselves and resist the ancient evil's influence. With their minds and souls on the line, they chose the latter. They confronted the darkness within themselves, facing their deepest fears and regrets head-on. It was a battle against their inner demons, a struggle for redemption and self-discovery. In that moment, they realized that the key to defeating the ancient evil was not in banishing it entirely, but in understanding and accepting the darkness that resided within humanity. They could not erase the malevolence, but they could choose not to succumb to it. With newfound strength and unity, they faced the idol once more. The ancient evil recoiled, its malevolence weakened by their resistance. The idol trembled, and the malevolent realm began to crumble around them. In a final act of defiance, they shattered the idol, its malevolence dissipating like smoke in the wind. The ancient evil's influence waned, and the malevolent realm collapsed into oblivion. As they stepped back into their world, they knew that their battle was far from over. The ancient evil might have been weakened, but it was not destroyed entirely. Its malevolence still lurked in the hearts of humanity, waiting for a chance to rise again. But they were not alone in their fight. Jonathan and his group knew that as long as they stood united, humanity had a chance to resist the darkness and rebuild a world free from the horrors they had faced. The war for humanity's soul was far from won, but they were ready to face whatever darkness lay ahead. With their hearts filled with hope and their spirits fortified by the bonds they had forged, they would stand as the final bastion against the malevolence that threatened to consume their world. The battle for survival had become a war for humanity's very essence, and Jonathan and his group were now the guardians of hope in a world plagued by despair. With their determination unyielding and their will unbreakable, they would face the terrors that lurked in the shadows, knowing that the price of humanity's survival could be nothing less than their very souls. In the aftermath of their harrowing encounter with the ancient evil, Jonathan and his group returned to their sanctuary, their minds burdened with the knowledge that the darkness they had faced was not truly vanquished. The malevolence still lingered, a whisper in the shadows, a constant reminder of the horrors they had endured. As days turned into weeks, the world around them seemed to sink deeper into darkness. The infected continued to roam the land, and other surviving groups succumbed to the malevolence, turning ruthless and violent. Yet, amidst the chaos, a glimmer of hope emerged. Jonathan and his group had inspired others to resist the malevolence, to find strength in unity, and to fight for a better future. The sanctuary grew into a haven for those seeking solace from the horrors of the world. In the midst of their newfound responsibilities, Jonathan struggled to come to terms with the darkness that still haunted him. Nightmares tormented his sleep, and he often found himself questioning his own sanity. Sarah, who had been the pillar of strength for the group, noticed his inner turmoil. Together, they sought solace in each other's presence, finding comfort in the shared burden of their experiences. One night, as they sat by a dimly lit fire, Sarah revealed her own fears and doubts. She confessed that the darkness seemed to follow her every step, that she feared becoming a vessel for the malevolence she had fought so hard to resist. Their hearts heavy with the weight of their mission, they knew that their fight was far from over. The ancient evil had not been destroyed. It had merely retreated to the shadows, waiting for the opportune moment to strike again. In the weeks that followed, strange occurrences plagued the sanctuary. Whispers echoed in the halls, and shadows danced on the walls. The infected seemed to be drawn to the sanctuary, as if guided by an unseen malevolent force. Jonathan and his group knew that the ancient evil was testing them, probing for weaknesses, and seeking a way to infiltrate their sanctuary. Paranoia and distrust seeped into their ranks, and they questioned each newcomer, fearing that the malevolence had found its way into their midst. In their search for answers, they turned to the Seeker's Journal once more. The ancient scholar had spoken of a ritual that could grant insight into the malevolence's true nature. A ritual that came with a warning. It could awaken forces beyond their control. Determined to confront the malevolence head-on, Jonathan and his companions prepared for the ritual. They gathered rare ingredients and inscribed ancient symbols onto the temple's walls, creating a sacred space for the ritual to unfold. The night of the ritual arrived, and the sanctuary was shrouded in an eerie silence. Jonathan and his group stood before the altar, candles flickering in the darkness. They chanted ancient incantations, their voices resonating with the energy of the world around them. As the ritual reached its peak, the very fabric of reality seemed to shift. The air crackled with energy, and a malevolent presence filled the chamber. Shadows twisted and contorted, taking on monstrous forms that clawed at the edges of their vision. The group's hearts pounded in their chests as the malevolence grew stronger. It felt as if the darkness was testing their resolve, seeking to break their spirits and consume them entirely. But they held on, drawing strength from each other and the shared purpose that bound them together. The ritual's power surged, and for a moment, it seemed as if the malevolence would be unleashed upon them. With a final surge of determination, they managed to subdue the malevolence, binding it to the confines of the temple. The shadows retreated, and the sanctuary returned to an uneasy calm. The ritual had granted them insight into the malevolence's true nature, revealing that it was a force as old as time itself, a malevolent entity that fed on humanity's darkest emotions and thrived on chaos and suffering. They realized that the only way to truly defeat the ancient evil was not through brute force, but through understanding and acceptance. They had to embrace their own darkness, their fears and regrets, and find strength in their shared humanity. The sanctuary became a beacon of hope, not just for its inhabitants, but for those seeking refuge from the horrors of the world. Survivors flocked to its walls, finding solace and camaraderie in the face of despair. But the malevolence continued to lurk, its whispers growing louder as it sought to break through the barriers they had erected. Jonathan and his group knew that their fight was far from over, and that the ancient evil's influence would continue to spread, seeking to plunge the world into eternal darkness. As the days turned into months, they prepared for the final confrontation, knowing that the fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. They trained in the arts of combat and magic, honing their skills to face the malevolence once more. The sanctuary became a fortress, its walls fortified with wards and protections to keep the malevolence at bay. They found strength in each other, their shared experiences forging a bond that transcended words. Finally, the day of the final battle arrived. The ancient evil's malevolence gathered like storm clouds on the horizon, and the infected seemed to move with a renewed ferocity. With heavy hearts and a steely resolve, Jonathan and his companions stepped out of the sanctuary and into the world beyond. The malevolence was waiting, its influence spreading like a relentless plague. As they faced the horrors before them, they knew that this battle would be different. It wasn't just about survival. It was about reclaiming their humanity, standing firm against the darkness that sought to tear them apart. In the ensuing battle, they faced nightmarish creatures, the infected transformed into grotesque abominations by the malevolence's touch. The sky darkened with malevolent energy, and the world seemed to teeter on the brink of oblivion. But Jonathan and his group fought with a determination that could not be broken. They channeled the energy of their shared humanity, resisting the darkness that sought to consume them. In the heart of the battle, Jonathan faced the ancient evil once more. Its malevolence seemed to wash over him like a tidal wave, threatening to drown him in despair. But he held on, drawing strength from the love and camaraderie of his companions. With a surge of power, he struck the ancient evil's true form, shattering the malevolence that had plagued their world for so long. The sky cleared, and the infected fell silent as the darkness dissipated. The world began to heal, and the infected slowly reverted to their human selves. Hope returned, and a new dawn seemed to break over the horizon. But Jonathan and his companions knew that the ancient evil was not truly destroyed. It would always be a part of humanity, lurking in the shadows, waiting for an opportune moment to rise again. As they returned to their sanctuary, they did so with a newfound understanding. The fight against the malevolence would never truly end, but as long as they stood together, united in their shared humanity, they would have the strength to face whatever darkness lay ahead. The battle for humanity's soul had been won, but the war was far from over. Jonathan and his group knew that they would face,